Hello viewers, welcome to our channel Fact Engine. The Cold War was a global struggle that defined the second half of the 20th century, pitting two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, against each other in a battle of ideologies. But how did this standoff begin, and what exactly was the Cold War? Let's dive into the origins of this conflict and its impact on the world. Phase 1. The origins of the Cold War. The roots of the Cold War can be traced back to the closing days of World War II. As the war against Nazi Germany drew to a close, the Allied powers led by the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom began to focus on the post-war world. However, tensions quickly arose between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin. At the heart of the conflict was a fundamental clash of ideologies. The United States championed capitalism and democracy, while the Soviet Union promoted communism and a centrally planned economy. These opposing visions for the future created an environment ripe for confrontation. Phase 2. The division of Europe. One of the first major flashpoints of the Cold War was the division of Europe. After Germany's defeat in 1945, the continent was effectively split into two spheres of influence. The Western Allies, led by the United States, controlled the western half of Germany and much of Western Europe, while the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe. The physical and ideological divide became known as the Iron Curtain, a term popularized by Winston Churchill in a famous speech in 1946. The Iron Curtain symbolized the stark division between the democratic capitalist West and the communist East, setting the stage for decades of rivalry. Phase 3. The first confrontations. The Cold War quickly moved from a war of words to a series of confrontations. In 1947, the United States introduced the Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid package designed to rebuild war-torn Europe and prevent the spread of communism. The Soviets viewed this as an attempt to undermine their influence in Eastern Europe and responded by tightening their control over the region. In 1948, Berlin became the first major flashpoint of the Cold War. The city, located deep within Soviet-controlled East Germany, was divided into 4 zones controlled by the Allies. When the Soviets blocked all access to West Berlin, the United States and its allies launched the Berlin Airlift, supplying the city by air for nearly a year until the blockade was lifted. Phase 4. The Cold War escalates. The Cold War wasn't a traditional war with direct military conflict between the two superpowers, but rather a series of proxy wars, political standoffs, and an arms race that threatened global security. The United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a nuclear arms race, each building up vast arsenals of atomic weapons, capable of annihilating the other. This led to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, where both sides understood that any nuclear attack would lead to total destruction for both. Beyond Europe, the Cold War spread across the globe. The Korean War in the early 1950s was one of the first hot conflicts of the Cold War, where the United States and its allies fought against communist forces backed by the Soviet Union and China. Similar proxy wars would erupt in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and various parts of Africa and Latin America. Phase 5. The global impact of the Cold War. The Cold War touched nearly every aspect of life and politics around the world. It led to the space race, with the United States and the Soviet Union competing to dominate space exploration. It also brought the world to the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, where a standoff over Soviet missiles in Cuba nearly led to a catastrophic conflict. Over the decades, the Cold War shaped global alliances, created military blocs like NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and influenced international relations in ways that are still felt today. Phase 6. The end of the Cold War. The Cold War began to thaw in the late 1980s as the Soviet Union faced internal economic challenges and political reform. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, the most powerful symbol of the Cold War, fell, signaling the collapse of communist regimes across Eastern Europe. 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, marking the official end of the Cold War. But the legacy of the Cold War lives on, influencing modern geopolitics, military strategy, and international relations. So, what do you think? How did the Cold War shape the world we live in today? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into the most pivotal moments in history. Thanks for watching. See you again in Fact Engine.